the recording, and you'll just be able to access it via the Kajabi platform. While we're waiting for everyone to join, while we're waiting for everyone to join, it would be really cool in the comments to hear from you as to what you are, whether you're about to face the interview, whether you're thinking about applying next year, whether you're a parent, anything else like that would be really useful to know.
Parents in here.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to mute everyone. Just make sure you're muted if you can when you're coming in. But yeah, if you just comment in the chat who you are, what you're applying for, that would be really, really helpful. And yeah, we're going to start at about 8 in a couple of minutes. Brilliant, Liana, that's wicked. Wicked, Ben, that's really great. If you're a parent, please kind of feel to say, if you're in year 12 or first year of sixth form and you're fascinated, if you haven't got your subject, it'd be really cool to know, just so we can kind of check out who is who's thinking about what. And you will see, or you will see in a minute, we've got 4 incredibly talented undergraduates who have very, very, very generously taken the time to be here today. And they will be introduced to you in the session. And they are overworked, underpaid, and they are here to give their experience, their kind of top tips, and be ready to take your questions. So I'm going to crack on actually while everyone is using. I hope everyone can hear me okay and see me okay. This is what we're going to try and achieve in the next hour and a half. We're going to go through the basics. You're going to be stuck with me for the first couple of minutes to go through the kind of what's, the whys, all that kind of stuff. And then I'm going to give over the session to our phenomenal undergrads who have literally gone through this experience not so long ago. So at 8:15, we're going to start with Daniel, and he is studying economics at St John's College, Cambridge. I've said economics / applied maths because that's really what econ is. It's the application of maths. Sorry, I have tried to mute people. It doesn't seem to be working. Hamid, Daniel, Elishba, or Hannah, if you are any good at the tech, please have a go at seeing if you can mute everyone. That'd be amazing. Anyway, sorry. So yeah, applied maths. It's basically, it could be land economy, it could be PPE, could maybe even stretch to social science. So he's going to be with us for that kind of 15 minutes of time. Then at 8:30, we've got biochemistry with Hannah. Hannah is a second year at Hertford College, Oxford. She also can be kind of talking about biology, human sciences, chemistry, sorry, guys. Thank you. At 8:45, we've got law with Elishba, and she is first year law undergrad at Downing. She also is really keen to talk about English, maybe kind of doing some English group mock sessions as well, even though law and English in a way feel quite a jar, but they're actually very similar. And then at 9 to 9:15, we've got engineering with the phenomenal Hamid, who is third year at Christchurch College, Oxford, our most experienced undergraduate. And then we're going to have some time for a Q&A at the end, but do kind of be adding to your chat any questions as we go. Please don't unmute through the session, just so that we can kind of keep the flow, but please do add your kind of questions, your comments, your concerns, and I'll chart those questions, and then we can take those questions at the end. Our lovely undergrads are here for the session, so they'll also be looking at the chat and kind of responding to you as and when, if they can. So that's the kind of the basics. Now, I just want to say I've just literally added this photo while I was trying to get my kids to sleep. This is an intentional photo. It's not like, what the hell is Clem doing? Why are there pictures of her children on the opening slide? And I think the thing that I would love all of you to go away with an understanding of this interview process is to really harness the spirit of a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old. Now, that sounds mad, but interviews, I think often in my experience, I get students who feel that they need to use fancy language and posh words, and they need to wear suits or whatever. But actually, an interview is a chance to really try and kind of grapple with the big concepts, the whys, the keep asking questions, and the kind of exploring answers, not naively, but boldly, bravely. And I really feel like if you can kind of really embrace the power of a toddler, I think you are somewhere towards winning at an interview with that added crystal clarity of a kind of 17, 18-year-old, 19-year-old scholar. So try and embrace the toddlerhood, please. Try and embrace that kind of openness, that keenness, the enthusiasm, and the big questions. So please picture my young boys, not in a weird way. So let's review the basics. Firstly, the timeline. Some of you might have got your interviews already, as in the dates of them. Some of you might still be waiting. If you've applied to Cambridge with a Cambridge College admission assessment, then you probably will have heard by now still. You have a couple of days to hear if you haven't, so don't panic. But essentially, invites will be sent from now on till the end of November. If you don't hear by the 28th of November, I just say email them. And up until the point of hearing, I would say no news is good news. The interviews will be conducted in early December up until the end of December. With the exception of Cambridge that conduct their pooling interview, which is where maybe a college has interviewed you, they like you, but they can't take you. They will then add you to the pool and another college will pick you out and come January want to interview you again. There's also another interview with Cambridge actually in the summer. It's the summer pool, which is a second opportunity to be taken up. I'll explain that at the end. But basically, you've got the main interview period, December, with a few kind of extra interviews in January. Oxford do their pooling before Christmas. And then outcomes, really helpfully, Oxford have one offer day on the 13th of January where everyone hears whether they've got an offer or not. Cambridge is slightly different. It's rolling depending on the course and the college, but they're basically around the same time. But Cambridge just likes to add a bit of spice. I should say I went to Corpus College, Cambridge, back in the day. Now, the format. Essentially, I wish there was a really simple one size fits all answer to this question, but there's not. It's because it's multivarious. It depends upon the college. It depends upon the course. And also, I want you to know that every college invests about 20 human hours of their time looking at your application. There's a lot of time given to this. And so there is a lot of opportunity for different colleges, different professionals to consider you, to interview you. And I would just say, try not to read into anything if you've only got one interview or if you have 6. Just try to keep going. Last year, a couple of the students I was working with only had one interview and they were freaking out, being like, well, that's the end of that. Others were absolutely packed to the rafters. They had 6 interviews and they still got their offers. So try not to read too much into it, but there is a various scale. Often Oxford, you will have more because Oxford tend to want to have you interviewed by multiple different colleges. Cambridge, sometimes they're happy with just one college interviewing you, but it also depends on the course. If you're doing a joint honours, if you're doing a course where you have split professors across different colleges, they will want to interview you. The interview is completely and 100% academic in nature. It's not let's burn a tie, let's see how you react to a ball being thrown into your face. That's all the old horror stories. These are academic interviews. They normally range between 20 to 40 minutes. Probably 30 minutes is like the average time. I would say the longer the interview, the less likely you will be to have multiple interviews. Again, my student last year who had a 55-minute interview only had one interview. So kind of think about that when you're in the interview room. It's not necessarily, oh my goodness, they love me, I've been in the room for an hour and a half or whatever. Again, just try to take it at face value and just be like, this is an opportunity to speak to a professional. 70% of them are online. Cambridge, there are a few colleges that do still have you in person, King's being one. I can't remember which one the other one is, but most are online. And it's a really interesting point that I would say in practicing for these interviews to really practice kind of interviewing online, not just kind of face to face, practicing being in a camera screen, practice kind of not getting too distracted by looking at yourself, but also particularly with STEM, practicing like any virtual whiteboards that your course or your college might be recommending. Myra being one that Hamid, I'm sure, will explain in a minute. Usually you will have about 2 professionals with you, maybe more, but normally you'll have a minimum of 2. So that's the format. And then In terms of the mark scheme, what are they looking for is literally the biggest question, really. And again, like with the format, like with the timeline, there is no singular answer because it changes. It is quite a human thing. But I would say that the three C's are a really clear guiding point as to what they're wanting. They're not wanting these academic geniuses, they're wanting clarity. They're wanting coherence and they're wanting critical thinking. I think we all know what clarity means, but coherence is something quite interesting. Coherence is your ability to share ideas, but to bring it all together in a conclusion. It is not just to kind of be like spitfiring words, but it's able to kind of, it's being able to share ideas and then look at the overall whole and then come up with a decisive kind of conclusion. It's basically trying to, it's basically organizing your thoughts. That's what I think coherence is. Critical thinking is your ability to evaluate, your ability to consider the strengths, the weaknesses of a viewpoint, of an argument, of a theory, of a method, and again, come to your own opinion. Now, it leads into a bullet point that I'm really keen when I do mock interviews with students that I want to see, and it's independence. I want to see independent thought. I don't want students to be parroting what I say, and that being a really important kind of warning. Do not spend too much time. Guys, sorry, could you just check that you are muted? I think there's a few people that aren't. If you'd just be so kind as to check you're muted, that'd be really cool. Thank you so much. Independence is having the confidence to have your own opinion, to say something new. Think about my 5-year-old, think about my kind of the toddler mindset. They're free to say whatever the hell they want because they're not bound by kind of arrogance or wanting to appear a certain way. And my word of warning was, don't get sucked into the cycle of, well, what do you think? Don't try and reclaim the interview as you're the interviewer and you're interviewing the professors. They don't care about their opinions, they care about yours. So stick to it. Don't if you have an opinion and you realize you have a different kind of view on it by the end, don't stick to it. Be able to change your viewpoint, but do allow yourself to have that independence of thought in the beginning, if that makes sense. But a bit of humility and a bit of adaptability. And then finally, the teachability point, I guess, is what I'm saying. If you think about an interview as an audition for a supervision or a tutorial, which is what these things are called, this dialogic way of learning, which is what Oxford and Cambridge is famous for, these small group learnings, you are essentially auditioning for that learning environment. So therefore, they're looking to see if you are teachable. They are looking to see if you, A, would enjoy this environment, B, if you would thrive in it, and C, if you can take, maybe not criticism, but if you can take challenge and grow with it and change your viewpoint, and essentially, if you can learn something from them. If you can, you're in with a shot. If you go in there and you're like, no, this is what I think, this is what I think at the end, this is what I think at the beginning, thank you very much, goodbye, done. There's no movement. Think about a mock interview, or sorry, think about an interview as an audition for the supervision. Think about it as a teaching move. It's a dialogic learning. And if you can learn with them, then you're on to a winner. Anyway, I need to crack on because I talk forever. Finally, the types of questions. I've again just changed this because I had loads of different types of questions. And then actually I realized the types of questions change so markedly depending on whether you're an MML student, whether you're a history student, whether you're an econ, whether you're an engineer, blah, blah, blah. But the thing that I think stays the same is, number one, all the interview questions are academic. That's the first thing. And then secondly, I would say there's always a progression of questioning. And I would say generally interviewers move from the comfortable, from the how are you, why this course, tell me about your personal statement, to a familiar territory. So maybe they will they'll discuss your written work, maybe something you've mentioned in your personal statement and want you to explore it, to then much more stretching questions where they are trying to see how you apply what you know to what you don't. And then really, hopefully, they're going to try and get you to your intellectual limit where you might be a bit stumped. The progression is aimed to be within every question, within any interview. And I don't want that to freak you out, being like, oh my god, you're looking at the mountain, be like, well, how am I going to get up to that point? Like anything, until you're doing it, you can't understand that you can do it. When I was doing a half marathon, I was like, how am I going to finish that? It's only when you start doing it that you realize, okay, yeah, I'm here and then I'm here. And they're going to guide you. It's not like these question fire answers. They're going to guide you every step of the way. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. I'll come back to that if you have any questions. That's not helpful, is it? Basically, essentially, they just want to know what you think, why you think what you think, and then thirdly, how have you got there? They're the 3 key points. I'll make the slides. I'll change the slides so you can see it. But essentially, what do you think? Why do you think that? And how did you get there? Okay, they're the 3 things that also they want to see along the way. Here's some myth busting really, really quickly. There are no right and wrong answers. That's the kind of that's the first thing. There are there are right and wrong answers. That's incorrect. They don't care really what you're actually saying. They're looking at how you think, not what you answer. Myth number 2, they're trying to trick you. Absolutely not. They're trying to teach you, actually, and they're trying to see how you perform in this environment. Number 3, you need to sound incredibly fancy and intelligent. Absolutely not. Please be yourself, because underlined, if you're not yourself, well, you're auditioning for a different role that you're not going to be able to sustain for 3 years. Clear thinking beats fancy words every time. Remember, clarity, coherence being the first 2 phenomenal mark schemes that they're looking for. Silence is bad. You must speak immediately. There's loads of like chat around speaking out your thoughts, always kind of verbalizing, blah, blah, blah. It is okay to have a moment of thinking, a moment of pause. Even when you're not sure, just try and verbalize the working out period. But silence is never bad. It's only bad if it's sustained and you're there drawing your graph silently for an hour. But you don't need to speak immediately. And then finally, the interview is about judging whether you're good enough. And this is the thing that I want you all to know. Number 1, think of my 5-year-old. Number 2, that you are already good enough. That's why you've got an interview. That's why you've applied. They're just trying to decipher whether you are going to thrive specifically in this dialogic tutorial alongside world experts. But you have totally won by getting the interview. So do please remember all those points. How to prepare, I'll probably go through this a bit more at the end because I don't want to take over too much time from our lovely undergrads. But have a look at this. I'd essentially say now for the next 3 weeks, which is really what you've got, think about reviewing your personal statement, reviewing your written work, reviewing your syllabus. That's standard, but continuing to engage in ideas, continuing to develop. Don't think, oh, well, that's what I've read for my personal statement. Bish, bash, bosh, done. You've got to keep trying to water your garden in the sense of watering your academic interest so that you are a growing organism. Practicing communicating out loud, pretty standard. Practicing looking at unseen material is really useful. Practicing your diagram drawing, thank you, Hamid, for that one. And undertake mock interviews as and when you can with your peers, with your mates. If you want to work with us, we'll show you how to do that in a second. During the interview, take each question as it comes. I will tell you if I have time later, my experience. I was interviewed by about 5 colleges by the end. I've probably failed 3 times and succeeded twice. But the thing about it is every question is going to throw you. Some are going to be good, some are going to be bad, and you've just got to kind of like close it down and focus on the next one. Keep focusing on each question as it comes. Verbalize your thinking when you can, and remember to use as much evidence as possible, rather than just keeping on this vacuous, this is what I think, just try and ground it in evidence. And then post-interview, give yourself a massive treat. Honestly, genuinely, you deserve it. And regardless of your outcome, always request feedback. Danielle, it'd be wicked for you to share any thoughts around the freedom of information, because I know you're really good at stuff like that. But I'll leave that there. Now, just before you hear from the undergrads, I just want to show you what we're offering and what I'm kind of running for the first time ever. I'm running these small group interviews where only 4 students are going to be working with Alishba, Hannah, Hamid, and Danielle, and myself. And these are the first slots. Law is not almost gone. English is almost gone. We probably will bring in a few more, but these are the group interviews that are, I think, going to be really exciting. Cameras will be off. You'll get a pre-reading. You'll have a 15-minute kind of section each, and then you'll get personalized feedback, but you'll also get an opportunity to hear how other people go and kind of have a go at questions. And that's not to mimic them, but I really believe that whilst we're all in a very kind of competitive environment, that learning from each other is literally the gold dust of it all. And hearing how people are approaching it will only ever help you and indeed the person having it go. So that's our group interviews. Any questions, let me know on that. And then you also get an opportunity, if you'd like to have any one-to-one interviews. I have very limited time left, but Danielle, Alicia, and Hannah have got some time to run one-to-ones. So if you would like a one-to-one, 60 minutes all with them, be my guest and book yourself in with them. So I think without further ado, we're going to go to the lovely Danielle.
No, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. I'm going to mute.
Fantastic.
Go for it.
Wait, is there any chance I can actually share my screen? Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, cool. Hopefully you can see that okay. Can I get a thumbs up, or like, can someone just say?
Yeah, I'm going to stop mine. Yeah. If you, Daniel, if you put, yeah, perfect.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. Hello, guys. My name is Daniel. You can see that on the screen. I'm from Hertfordshire, best place ever. I study economics at John's. It's really great. I have a really nice room. That's me outside the Bridge of Sighs, which is part of John's. No one in my family's ever gone to Oxbridge. It's literally unheard of. There's a big thing of like, you need to be a genius to go to Oxbridge, stuff like that. I'm here. You actually don't need to be. I swear to God, you don't. Although there are geniuses here. Keep that in mind. Hopefully you can still hear me okay, because it says weak network. Underrepresented background. I did a gap year as well. Any questions on that, I'll probably answer them later, but we're short for time, so I'll go quick. So what is economics? Econ's literally just like, it's kind of just common sense formalized. That's how I tend to think of it. It is actually quite intellectually challenging at university. At A-level, it's a lot more relaxed. I will say, though, that it is very much mathematical. Yeah, very mathsy course, applied maths, very much agree. 2 quick points, by the way, based on what Clem said just now. Firstly, if you don't know a bit of law, Clem actually gave me a mock interview. She is the GOAT. More on that later. But yeah, I'm here now. So hopefully that's a testament. And also her advice just generally for preparing for interviews, like those 3 C's are incredibly useful. Incredibly useful. I would 100% like, I don't know, write that out and put that on my wall or something like that. Yeah, there we go. Cool. How I prepare. ChatGPT. 100% the most useful thing I did. If I were you, I'd buy GPT Plus. I think it's 20 quid a month. Best thing ever. I actually paid for the more expensive one, which was like 100 quid. But I think return on investment costs £100, but then a place at Cambridge is like worth a lot, right? Future ROI. In terms of specifically using GPT, there's 2 main ways in which I think you can use it. So the first way is using the voice mode. So primarily you can use it on your phone, but also you can use it on the computer. And essentially what I used to do, you should pay attention here because I'm going to be very specific. The 3 C's, which Clem mentioned, I used to feed them into GPT. So I'd say, hello, please test me on C1, C2, C3. When you ask me about economics questions, keep those in mind and essentially just give me a score out of 10 for those criteria. And I also used to say, I want to rank first in the admissions process, just so it'd be really blunt and brutal with me. So that was really useful. And then over time, I could like track my scores and how they changed because ChatGPT has memory. So for example, at the very start, I remember my logical chains were quite bad. I wasn't really good at my logical chains, but they improved over time. Yeah, GPT is really useful. And then aside from that, just learning as much as you can using GPT. What I'd really recommend, especially for subjects you've never done before, or like social sciences or like history, philosophy, whatever. What I'd recommend is you should probably learn the basics of the subject, like the basic arguments for like key topics which come up. So for example, for philosophy, it's probably a good idea to learn some basic, not schools of thought, like perspectives. So like the Kantian thought or the Aristotelian thought. I have not pronounced that correctly. And for law, I'm sure there's some basic stuff that you can learn as well. I think that's probably pretty useful. For economics, I learned the schools of thought. There we go. Cool. Personal statement. Nothing came up for my personal statement. I don't even think they read it. It varies based on subject. I think for STEM, they don't really care. For social sciences, they'll probably ask you a question. Depends. My mate who did HSPS got a ton of questions. One of my econ friends got quite a few questions, so it varies. But obviously, like, you want to leave no stone unturned. So make sure you know your personal statement well. Put it into GPT. Oh, actually, good idea for personal statement. Print it out and then use a pen and just like highlight every single line and create a minimum of 3 questions per line they might ask you. That's a good idea, but also use GPT. There we go. Mock interviews, obviously. A little birdie told me that Clem's actually running some mock interview stuff, which you just heard about. So yeah, sign up. It's going to be live. It's going to be so cool. Maths. So if you're studying any sort of STEM or STEM adjacent subject, maths will inevitably come up. The most common type of maths that comes up is graph sketching. In particular, I'm referring to courses like maths, natural sciences, engineering, economics. Yeah, graph sketching comes up very often. I think someone's mic is unmuted, so if someone can mute that, that'd be great. Yeah, so with the graph sketching, there's a very simple method, but if you don't know it, you really don't know it. So use YouTube videos to learn the method. Literally just search in Oxbridge graph sketching. If I didn't have that method, I would have been cooked. Yeah. The Economist, obviously I'm applying for economics. Pay attention to the news. Any social science should be doing that. So if you're applying for like, I don't know, HSPS, maybe even history, to be honest, it's good to keep up with current affairs. Generally, if you want to be a contributing citizen to our world, even if you're studying maths, read the news. It's a good idea. Cool. YouTube videos are really helpful. In particular, watch like YouTube videos to do with your subject, obviously. So if you're applying for Natsky, I don't know, Veritasium or something like that. For economics, if anyone's applying, I think I saw someone applying to Claire for economics. Money and Macro, Economics Explained, Economics Help UK. If you like YouTube channel suggestions for other subjects, you can ask me, but to be honest, you can just search your subject in. Like for, I don't know, for law, for example, Legal Eagle, I've heard of that bloke. For HSPS, you can just search Simple Politics, whatever. Cool. Podcasts, oh my God. John Maynard Keynes, if any of you do A-level econ, his granddaughter runs a podcast and she went to Cambridge for economics as well. And it's such a good podcast. Best thing I've ever listened to. I would actually say podcasts are extremely useful for humanities and social sciences, because when you hear experts explain something, you can kind of mimic the way they explain it. Obviously, Clem made a very good point that you shouldn't just parrot people. But what I mean is, like, when you are talking about anything to do with economics, if you can phrase it in a sophisticated way, I suppose it's just good to use like technical terms, but it's not that deep at the end of the day. I just like it. Yeah, it's just meme. I thought it was quite funny. No one's laughing, sorry. ChatGPT is really good, but obviously don't rely on it. Could be wrong. Make sure fact check, stuff like that. I used to use like Gemini to fact check GPT. I thought that was pretty cute. Oh yeah, one other thing. You can find these like random tutoring companies online. So much of it is nonsense, like actually nonsense. Like they charge you like insane amounts and stuff like that. And it's just really stupid because they're literally extortionate. I would really avoid them. I spoke to a lot of my friends about it. Some of them actually did mock interviews with these guys. They said it was nothing like their actual exam. So use trusted sources like Clem. Other sources I'd recommend, if you have anyone in your family who's gone to Oxbridge, take advantage. Anything else? Ask your school. Your teachers can probably give good mock interviews. Anyone else applying from your school or a different school, take advantage. But just don't waste your money on mock interviews which aren't realistic. Like these guys are the types of people to like chuck you a banana and say, how does that relate to philosophy? Cool. Obviously, Clem's a go. Watch her videos. Wow. Go icon, slay, best ever. Listen to her. Her advice is, once again, really useful, obviously. The 3 C's, I'd say extremely useful. Yeah, cool. Pre-reading. So I got pre-reading in my interview. For social sciences, humanities, etc., you're fairly likely to get pre-reading. For most of my friends I spoke to, they had pre-reading. How long in advance do you get the pre-reading? Varies. I got mine 3 days in advance, but I was quite lucky. I think most people either get it an hour in advance or maybe like 30 minutes in advance. Varies. Any other thoughts on getting it in advance? Well, as soon as you get it, read it, obviously. If you're in person, they'll probably not let you use your phone. So yeah, keep that in mind. Anything else? Take notes. Yeah, cool. So what can they ask you for your pre-reading? These are 3 main things I think they'll ask you if it's social sciences, humanities. Firstly, recall. So literally just facts, just make sure you like read it. So first question, what was GDP growth in 2022, 2024 real times? It gives you the exact answer in the essay, in the pre-reading, 3%, they'll go bosh. Just knowing those facts. I know it's a bit tedious, but yeah, that came up in my interview. Number 2, argument. This is really big, especially for like social sciences, I think, more so than anything. Arguments are the name of the game when it comes to Oxbridge, like the understanding the author's argument and evaluating the argument, so much of that. So yeah, they might ask you what the argument is. What I would recommend for arguments in particular, I think this is a useful piece of advice. Write out the argument in terms of logical chains. So A leads to B leads to C. For example, I am hungry. I have money to buy food. There is food available for me to buy, therefore I will buy food. Something like that. I know it's a really bad example of an argument. I'm sorry, Clem. But yeah, arguments, breaking them down, really good. Use logical chains. Finally, opinion. They might ask you opinion-based questions. So they might give you someone's argument. And this is really weird. I want to make a point about this, actually. They might give you like a really famous bloke's argument or lady, whoever. And they made some like fundamentally like life-changing point about something. And then they'll say to you, evaluate the strength. And from your perspective, you're probably thinking, what? I'm like 18. I don't know what I'm doing. How on earth am I meant to like critique someone who's far more knowledgeable than me? People dedicate their entire lives to the subject, but you need to have confidence. You're going to go to Oxbridge for a reason. Joe, as a matter of fact, my senior tutor actually said to me that a lot of times, like once a week, he hears something from his students he's never heard before. So yeah, there we go. TLDRs, have confidence. Cool. ChatGPT, super useful for pre-reading if you can use it. I got mine 3 days in advance, so you know that's going straight into chat. As well as that Anki, that's a flashcard app. I use that to memorize literally the entire article. I got it 3 days in advance. So I thought I may as well. I think that was a pretty high return on investment for that. But if you get it like 3 hours in advance, don't memorize all of that. They won't realistically ask you stuff on anything. But yeah, cool. The interview. So I'm giving some examples of questions I got. First one, what have you read about that you found interesting about economics? Give or take, I can't give you the exact questions, but it's kind of that. The 2 things I'd say, well, 3 things, there we go. Firstly, give a unique answer if you can. Like if there is room for you to say something which other people won't say, then it's probably a good idea insofar as it isn't super niche. Like if it's irrelevant, then it's silly. But what have you read about that you find interesting about economics? You could talk about anything. What did I talk about? I talked about drugs, the economics of drugs. I thought no one would talk about the economics of drugs. And as a matter of fact, I got my feedback back, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. And they seem to like drugs, or rather the economics of drugs. Who knows about the other one? No hate. Okay, detail. Give a lot of detail. Like if they're asking you a question, it's a bad idea to just give like, if they've asked me this question, right, you don't want to just say like 2 sentences. You want to go into a bit of detail. So like, oh, I've read about this. This is what I found interesting about it. This is what I disagreed with. This is your opportunity to flex. You can direct the conversation. So I think it's a bit irrational if you just don't say very much. Guide the conversation. Good idea. Wider reading. Social sciences, once again. Sorry, this is quite social sciences focused, but we have other people as well. But yeah, with social sciences, it's really good to flex your wider reading and current affairs. Don't just whack it in if it isn't relevant, but do whack it in if it's helpful and you think it'll be interesting. Cool. How does COVID affect debt? That's another question I got. One thing is like, if there's different arguments, then you don't just have to give one. You can give multiple. So you can say, this is the strongest argument. Maybe try and evaluate. This is the strongest one. This one's a decent one as well. Giving different arguments is good. Bringing in current affairs as well. That's a good idea. Like it helps you stand out if it's relevant. And also take a touch. Okay, this is arguably the biggest piece of advice I could give. I've done a lot of mock interviews in my lifetime. I'm sounding like I'm old. The one massive mistake I see so many people make is they answer the question immediately. Don't do that. Please don't do that. If you answer the question immediately, you haven't given it serious thought. You're giving like a robotic answer. Don't do that. Please don't do that. To give an example, when I first got asked the question about like, what have you found interesting in economics or whatever, I literally sat there and didn't say anything for like 30 seconds. I'm not even joking. It was 30 seconds. I just sat there. I was just deeping it. And that's okay. They don't care. They literally don't care. My answer was really good for that and they didn't care. Furthermore, it's more embarrassing to take a pause in the middle of your speech than at the very start. At the start, they don't care. They'll let you do stuff. Gives them a second to sip some water anyways. But please take a touch. Even if you have the answer immediately, wait like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, however long you need. But don't answer immediately. Because even if you have a good answer immediately, it comes across as though you haven't thought about it seriously. And that's not good because you want proper thought. I don't know how much time we have. If someone can help me, that'd be good. This is what I talked about. I talked about drugs in my personal statement. There we go. Cool. Love drugs. Like talk about drugs. Cool. Dodgy questions. I've asked a really dodgy graph sketching question. It's nuts. It's actually nuts. You can see the 2 minutes left. Oh my God. You can see this here. Really dodgy. Yeah, very scary. How do you approach dodgy questions? Link it to stuff you already know. Like that looks dodgy, but I did some differentiation, learned the method, etc. Yeah, dodgy questions. Link it to stuff you know and just be composed. Grading. I thought I did okay. I thought I did it right. I actually did really well. So for example, I mentioned earlier about the discussion question. I got a really high score on that. I got basically a perfect score. And in another section for critical thinking, I also got 10. So yeah, quite happy with that. I was really surprised. I didn't think I did that well. Like I thought I did it well, like decently, but I did really well somehow. This was me after the interview. I thought I was cooked, but there we go. Reflections. What surprised me most, they're not going to be super nice to you all the time. They should be. They're told to be, but not all the time. Like my interviewer, little bit tedious. I don't know, a little bit weird, but they're really nice people. So yeah, one thing I wish I knew, okay, they very rarely ask odd questions, and it's almost like it's a mythical thing. But at the end of my interview, they did ask me, what do you wish we asked you? And that caught me off guard. It basically, no one's going to ask it. It's just an aside, but with my specific interview, I got asked that. So that's kind of weird. But it's probably not happening. So don't focus your information on that, your preparation. Strategies for preparing, optimize for each part of the interview. Okay, cool. If you know someone who is doing your course at the college that you've applied for, who's first, second, third year, message them. Message them on LinkedIn, message them email, whatever. Ask them for advice. Because sometimes colleges do similar interview types each year. So I got lucky because on my St. John's website, they said like everything that was coming up. They said, we'd ask you graph sketching, we'd ask you a discussion question, we'd give you an article. So I prepared specifically for those things, which means I didn't need to prepare that much for personal statement or other things that didn't come up. So if you can find out information about what's coming up, then take advantage. And finally, just be a bit obsessive. Yeah, like maybe that's quite a bad thing to say, but really, really like it's 2 months or like a month of really serious preparation. And it's a lifetime of game. This place is really sick. There we go. Ash Ketchum. I want to be the very best. Work your hardest. I've had a great time. That's me at Jack's with some of my mates yesterday. That's me at an Ent, which is a college party. Probably should not have that photo online. That's me on a boat party. We do boat parties in London. That's me punting with Jade. You might know Jade Mui, TikToker. Yeah, so lock in. There we go. Hopefully this is useful. Any questions you have, I'm sure you could drop them. Mock interviews are super useful. Sign up, stuff like that, and listen to Clem. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Love it. That's so cool. Thank you so much, Daniel. It was, yeah, it's a pleasure. And that is literal gold dust, guys. So when you are kind of going over this, do go over it, kind of make sure that you captured all of that stuff because it's gold, and the kind of pre-reading is brilliant. And just honestly, I think using AI is such a great tool. Don't rely on it. Don't be like, okay, ChatGPT said this, blah, blah, blah. But it's such a good tool, particularly for your prep, to try and identify what to kind of ask yourself and blah, blah, blah. I might, if we have time at the end, maybe we could talk about the freedom of information kind of request thing. I've actually never ever done one in my life before, but when sometimes the feedback that you will get is very, very vague if you don't get a place. However, you can do a freedom of information and they'll give you everything they've got on you. But anyway, more on that anon. Danielle, if you'd be so kind as to stop sharing your screen, that would be amazing. Because now, thanks. Thank you, sir. You're a good man. I don't think I've ever been called the GOAT before. That's exciting. I might add that to my LinkedIn profile. Anyway, we've now got the lovely Hannah, the biochemistry, Hertford College, Oxford, Hannah. So we're kind of interslicing it between Cambridge, Oxford. Hannah, shall I be your kind of mouse, and you just tell me when you want me to move on, etc.? Is that
that'd be great. Cheers.
Cool. All right, over to you, my love. I will mute, and the floor is yours.
Brilliant. So this is me, guys. Hertford College, best college. I saw someone was applying for biology there in the chat. So you're in for a treat. We have this lovely bridge here. It's a very friendly college. So yeah, make sure you pull up. I probably, unlike a lot of people here, I didn't really want to go to Oxbridge that much. I just applied because my teachers told me to. But throughout the interview process, I got more and more engaged, and ended up being the best decision ever. So yeah, good job for going for it, guys. So yeah, next slide, please. So what is biochemistry? It's not a subject you can do at A-level, so lots of people are confused. So we look at processes like DNA replication here, like a protein moving things across a membrane. We look at some organic chemistry. So if you do chemistry A-level, you might recognize this equation here. We do some maths, some physics, not my favorite, but you have to do it. And then we apply it all to the cell, to our humans, and see how we can use it in medicine or industry or research or whatever. So that's what biochemistry is. Next, please. So pre-interview, I was quite nervous. As I said, I did very little preparation. I didn't really think about it too much. I just sort of applied on a whim.
Is it working?
Sorry, I think someone's... There you go, perfect. So yeah, if you feel like I did and you haven't done much, don't be put off. I probably did like 3 hours prep total. Like I didn't lock in, as Danielle said. So yeah, don't worry too much. But I was very curious. So like Clem said, 5-year-old me was like, oh, what's this? What's that? And that I think is the best way for science. So next slide. So yeah, be inquisitive. Lots of YouTube videos. I put a couple here. Lots of scientific journals. For those, some of them obviously can be quite expensive, like the New Scientist and stuff. But you might have them in your school libraries, or if you go to any like public city library, you should be able to access some good scientific articles there. So yeah, read around the subject a bit. It will help a lot with your pre-reading, which I'll talk about later. Personal statement, they didn't really ask me that much about mine, but this is a book I read and wrote about. So yeah, just make sure you know what you're on about, just in case they ask. Course information, biochemistry, lots of people don't really know what it is, what you're going to be studying. Lots of the courses at different universities vary. So yeah, make sure you know precisely what's coming, and that'll look good if you know what you've actually applied for. And then analytical skills. It's obviously STEM. It's a very mathsy, logic subject. So any way that you can solve puzzles and stuff is great. And yeah, as everyone says, thinking out loud, speak to someone, explain something to your little sister, Just get used to hearing your own voice. So yeah, next slide. So pre-reading, I had 2 interviews. I think biochemistry at Oxford, you always have 2 interviews. I'm not sure what it's like at Cambridge for like NatSki and stuff, but I had pre-reading for one and not the other. I think it depends a lot on which college you apply for, whether the professor there likes it or not. But what mine was, and what I hear a lot, is scientific journals. So like an extract from an article or a journal. As I said, my interview was online. I got emailed mine an hour before. So I printed it off, I annotated it all, put some terms into Google. I actually did my interview. I applied deferred. So I don't think ChatGPT was a thing when I was preparing. So I just Googled stuff the old-fashioned way. But yeah, it'll be quite dense. There'll be lots of terms that you don't really know what they mean, lots of things you need to Google and clarify. But yeah, don't be put off when you read a sentence and you don't know what half the words mean. That's what it's for, just power through. And then they'll ask you some questions on it. So I got asked, what are 3 key conclusions? They'll show you like a figure, like a graph, and ask you to explain what it is. Again, don't be scared. I had absolutely no idea. I suggested something crazy. They clarified a bit. They helped me get to the answer. And then you might be asked to think a bit more independently. What could you do to test this theory further? Yeah, and that's obviously, they're not expecting you to come up with some like novel, crazy scientific breakthrough. They're just wanting you to be confident and suggest something and discuss it with them. So yeah, don't be put off if you do have it, if you don't have pre-reading, it really depends. So my interview experience, as I said, I had 2. And I really didn't think mine went very well at all. One of them, if any of you guys do biology, they asked me to explain the levels of protein structure and what sort of bonds you would find. And I completely forgot about hydrogen bonds. They were like, and what else would you maybe find? What else would you find? And I was like, I think I've covered it. I don't know anything else. And then they reminded me, they were like, oh, hydrogen bonds. And I felt so stupid, like this emoji here. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm never going to get in now. I completely forgot this basic information. But I took it on the chin, and then they ended up doing a whole question where I had to apply things about protein structure, and I ended up doing quite well on the question and figuring it out. So yeah, don't be afraid if you are completely wrong, or you just don't know anything, or you have a complete blunder. I put this picture here of someone rolling a boulder up a hill, because that's what it feels like sometimes. They'll start with a nice easy question, and then they'll just push you further and further until you really have no idea what you're talking about anymore. But they'll give you advice along the way and guide you up the hill, and that's what it's all for. So yeah, just try your best, be open-minded. And yeah, next slide. So grading, I actually didn't ask for my feedback, so can't really be very helpful there. But they'll be looking somewhat at your baseline knowledge. Do you know about, basic biological things, but really more how you respond to their feedback. If you know about the course, they can sense passion and curiosity within you, all the usual things that people are saying. And yeah, as Clem was saying, it mimics the supervision tutorial environment. It's called different things at Oxford and Cambridge. Tutorials at Oxford. Because whoever is interviewing you will end up being your tutor at your college. So if they have a terrible interview with you and you don't listen to them and you aren't flexible in your thinking at all, then they're not going to want to teach you. So yeah, that's what it's for. So these are some reflections. Both my interviews were very different. One was very discussion based about the pre-reading, and one was just like scientific problems I was solving. So yeah, expect the unexpected. It's really, they can pull up anything. Biochemistry is very interdisciplinary. So it could be physics, it could be maths, it could be just straight biology. It really depends. My interviewers were so nice. Some of them are like my professors now, and they're such lovely people. They generally love their subject and want to teach it to everyone. So they want to see you do well. They're not trying to catch you out and trick you. And just use that knowledge to really be confident. And yeah, there isn't one specific way to prepare. As I said, I did very little. I just made sure I knew my personal statement through and through. that's about it, really. But yeah, the more you can do, the better, but don't get really anxious thinking you're not prepared enough. Just being here on this webinar is great preparation. If they don't know where you went wrong, they can't help you make progress. So yeah, don't be, even if you know something's wrong and silly, just say it anyway, and they can help you out. And yeah, just take a deep breath, hold yourself high, and don't be afraid to say, actually, I'm not sure what you're on about. Can you repeat the question? Can you give me a hint? That's totally fine. I think I just have a few top tips after this. So yeah, biochemistry, biology, the same. We don't have an admissions test, which is 1+ of applying. So be prepared for your interview to be very skills-based. This is sort of their only way to test this from you. So yeah, mine didn't really ask about my personal statement at all. Don't be thrown off if they just completely blitz past it. They do care about you and your thoughts, but they need to use this time to really understand if you have logic and problem solving. And then find out what your interviewer's area of research is. So I saw people asking in the chat. At least for me, they told me who my interviewers were going to be. I had 2 for each interview. And you can probably very easily Google them, see their LinkedIn, see what sort of papers they're producing, see what they work with, whether they do lab-based experiments, whether they do more computational stuff. And that might give you a sort of idea of what they might be talking about. So one of my interviewers is big in the computational work doing about membrane proteins and stuff. And lo and behold, the question I was asked was very mathsy about chemicals moving through membranes and stuff. One of my interviewers works with worms. That's like how she studies. She knocks out genes in worms. And the first question, they showed me a picture of some worms under a microscope. And we were talking about how you would monitor these worms under the microscope. So that's not to say learn all of their things and be their biggest fan and hound them asking questions. They don't want that. But it might just help to get an idea of what sort of things might come up, because they're going to ask about things they're interested in and things they know about. They're not going to just go on a random tangent about something they have no idea what they do. So yeah, top tip number 2. I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Hannah. That was wicked. It's actually a really good point about kind of getting to know your interviewers, because you will know, as Hannah said. But there is a dark side of doing that. And I've often worked with students who've literally delved into their life story and kind of become that professor. And again, remember the kind of independence that they're interviewing you. They want your thoughts, they want your interests, they're appreciative of their interests, and obviously it's great to get a head start as to what they're kind of looking at, but don't parrot back their stuff. And yeah, it's kind of going back to, oh, but what do you think kind of thing. It just becomes a little bit sucking up a little bit too much. Anyway, that was wicked. Thank you so much, Hannah, and really clear. And I really like the kind of fusing of you made me understand biochemistry. I never really understand it. Actually, I've got a question for you that maybe we could answer at the end, but just to think about, how did you know you wanted to apply for biochem when you didn't study it? So don't worry about thinking about that now, but it would be really cool to hear your perspective on it, because I try and get loads of kids to apply for it and they're like, no. So your teacher is obviously more persuasive. Anyway, okay, let's hear from Elishba, who is first year drowning the goat law. So, by the way, every time Daniel, your comments of LMO and IMO, I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know. I only heard about the goat recently. Anyway, over to you, Elishba. Enough of that. Good luck. And are you happy for me to do the click, or do you want to?
Yes, please.
Great. Over to you, my love.
I see Danielle said that my college is dead, but I have a bathtub and a double bed, so I don't think that's true. Downing is the best college. You can see in the picture at the bottom there. A little bit of context. So I did English Lit, politics, and chemistry. I come from a very social mobility background, so free school meals, young carer, all that jazz. First generation uni student, so my parents didn't go to university, and a slightly unconventional route to Cambridge. So I actually did not apply to Cambridge in year 13. I had extenuating circumstances throughout the year, finished my year with 60% attendance, and missed my LSE offer because I got a D in chemistry and an A star in English and politics. I then applied to Cambridge literally because they have an extenuating circumstances form. And like now I'm here. So if you have a slightly unconventional route or you think Cambridge is not for you, it very much is for everyone. I was very close to rejecting my offer, and now when I think about it, I think I was psycho because I would have missed out on so much. So point is, Cambridge is for everyone. Downing is great, law is great. So yeah. Next. Yeah. Okay, so Downing, obviously some people here have mentioned Downing has a huge law reputation. We received the most applicants for law. This year we received 208, and the second most applied to college for law was Trinity, which received 117. So a kind of a big deal, but don't let that put you off. Law, a lot of reading, but every case literally feels like you're in some crazy scandal. A case that I recently read was about a man from the 1600s threatening to draw his sword at another man. So it's all fascinating stuff. If you're into a bit of gossip, I think law is very interesting. The way my degree is going at the moment, I have 2 supervisions a week. We usually alternate between essays and problem questions, but it's really dependent on your supervisor. I currently have 4 essays due in the next few days, but don't let that put you off. It is great. Next slide. Okay, so pre-interview. I cannot emphasize enough how right Clem is in terms of saying no news is good news. I went back and checked my emails and I received my interview invite on the 27th of November. So if you've not heard yet, do not be afraid. I got mine so late. Also, if you've applied to Downing, we do academic discussions for students from like social mobility backgrounds. So you might get an invite for one of those. Just look out for those. I'll be actually participating in that, so you might see me around. But yeah, I think like everyone, I was a bit shocked. I was ill. So if you do get ill, let your college know. I'm not saying that it will change everything, but it's important to give them as much context as you can because you never know what will help you. You'll hear a lot of horror stories about, you know, interviewers trying to like target you or bully you. I wouldn't say that's true. So don't let that startle you because it will be okay. Okay, preparation. So one thing I want to emphasize about law that is distinct from other subjects is you do not need legal knowledge. A lot of people will tell you like, what concepts should I read around, etc., etc., etc. Law is not like that. So in my interview, I got questions on why I wanted to do law. I got questions on my personal statement, pre-reading, and then like a fake statute kind of thing. But none of that required me to know anything about law. Everything is provided to you and it's very much skills based. So how can you read something? How can you deliver an argument? That kind of thing. The most important thing I'd say for law is talking out loud. With humanities students, there is a tendency to be a bit wishy-washy. You want to think in like a very abstract and eloquent manner, and that's not necessarily the best thing. So talk out loud, talk to people who don't know law and see if they can understand, you know, what you're saying. Also, anything that you've mentioned in your personal statement, it goes without saying that you should know it, but also the concepts around what you've mentioned. So in my personal statement, for example, I talked about non-maleficence in medical law and how you're not meant to essentially like cause harm. That's the general idea. I then looked up, you know, things to do with harm and how that's inconsistent in the law. So I talked about conscription laws and how even though we're not meant to cause harm, it seems like the law is endorsing harm by, you know, creating legislation around conscription. So looking at things that are sort of like branching off your key ideas and things you've mentioned, because it will show that you've done, you know, your due diligence, that you've gone that little step ahead. But it's not anything overly complicated. I think everyone said this, but keeping up with current affairs, so BBC articles, UN articles, all that kind of thing. I think the thing that people will struggle with the most is the pre-reading, because that is quite difficult, and I'll go into all of that. but I would recommend going onto the UK Supreme Court website for case summaries, because that is kind of similar to the level of difficulty that you'll get. So my interview, it felt really, really horrible in the moment. And I think this is like a universal experience, but it's not. My pre-reading was a case summary, which is the case on the screen right now, which feels very weird because I've now studied that case thoroughly. Essentially what happened is I got a background of the facts and then the judgments from all the judges, obviously, and I kind of had to discern what they were saying, what were the issues, so who disagreed, who agreed, and why was that. I then got given a fake statute and had to apply it to fake scenarios. So essentially you'll have something like, let's say, theft, and theft will be broken down into intention to deprive and then like the actual action of depriving someone of something. And then you might get scenarios where it's like, okay, well, Billy went and stole a cow, but he didn't mean to steal the cow when he stepped out. Is he guilty of theft? And that's a bad example, but that's the kind of thing you're looking at. So you'll have sort of like a mental and physical aspect, which is really important in law. That's kind of the whole thing. And if there's one bit of legal knowledge, the only exception that I would say is knowing mens rea and actus rea, which is basically just physical and mental element of every crime. That really helps really helps break down the kind of statute part. And the way you want to approach it is very formulaic. So essentially, mental plus physical equals guilty is the way you're kind of looking at it. And so when you have discrepancies between the mental bit and the physical bit, you want to look at why that might be. Does it still mean the person's guilty? Is there a case for them not to be? And then why is that? Personal statement, do not neglect that. You genuinely have no excuse not to know your personal statement. You literally talked about it, and you'll get a lot of people kind of say, oh, they didn't ask me about my personal statement or my EPQ or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You don't want to run the risk, but in my interview, they asked me about everything they could have asked me about. And then finally, why law? I mean, you're applying for the subject, so you should know, and everyone's answers will be different, but make sure that you're focusing on why you want to study law. So don't tell me that, I really like debating in court and I'd love to wear a wig and a gown, because great, you've told me why you want to be a lawyer. You've told me, why the profession is appealing to you, but why don't you go do a history degree and then do the GDL? It doesn't make sense for you to study law and put yourself through that. So really focus on why you want to study law. In my interview, I basically talked about how law is a very multifaceted subject. So essentially, when you're thinking like a lawyer, you're not just thinking about legislation. If you're looking at company law, you're trying to fulfill on or deliver on client needs. So you're thinking like a businesswoman. If you're looking at copyright law, you're thinking from a very artistic perspective, thinking, how do I preserve the artistic integrity of this person? How do I protect them? And so on and so forth. So there's a lot to law, and you want to make sure that whatever answer you give and whatever answer you prepare is focused on studying law and not being a lawyer. Okay, so this is the sample pre-reading. It might look a bit daunting to you, and if it doesn't, you scare me a little bit. I've studied this case and it still looks scary to me. First of all, it's going to look like massive, massive chunks of text, and there's going to be lots of bits that refer to legislation. So you've got FOIA in there, which is Freedom of Information Act, the EIR, etc., etc. Don't really get caught up in those bits of legislation. You're going to have a lot of names, a lot of dates. The way cases are structured, if you're not familiar, they'll give a background as to the facts, and then a case might be appealed. So they'll give a background at a lower court, what happened in that case, and then they'll say, so-and-so is appealing this judgment for this reason, and then the judge will go into what their opinion is. That's the important bit that you need to focus on. So all the bits in between of saying, oh, well, this is what happened previously before they appealed, and this is why they want to appeal, it's not really going to be helpful. It's focused on legislation. It's just context, it's background, and that's not how we read cases even in our degree. So essentially, break it down. You're going to have questions that guide you at the bottom of the page, but break it down. Think about who are the parties, what are their roles. So for example, in this case, we've got Prince of Wales, so King Charles now, but at the time Prince of Wales. We've got Evans, who's a journalist, and we've got the Attorney General. So we know who each of those people are. We know that there's a prince, a journalist, and an Attorney General, so someone holding like a key legal position. And then we're going to think about, why are they invested in this case? So what do each of them want? What are they trying to achieve, right? So in this case, a journalist basically wanted access to letters that the Prince of Wales wrote to government offices, and the Attorney General essentially said, no, we're not going to do that. Now, once you establish that, focus on your opinion. So what are the potential issues with each of the arguments from both sides of the parties? For example, is it bad that we don't know what key leaders in our country are doing, and why might that be so? So I might say, for example, well, we have a right to know, per the Freedom of Information Act, to know what key leaders in the country are doing. It's also important because those matters and the things they're talking about affect us. That doesn't require legal knowledge, but it's a very sound argument to make. So what I want to emphasize is, even with your pre-reading, it's not about legal knowledge, it's about making sound, rational arguments. But yeah, try to form your own opinion. Don't get caught up in all of it. Also, with your pre-reading, for mine personally, I was not as lucky as these guys. I got mine 30 minutes prior to my interview, and I had a student from the college watching me as I read it. And you make notes. Try to make your notes brief. Obviously, focus on the questions that they give you, but also the things that I've mentioned. So who the parties are, what the key issue is, and what the final judgment is. And then also, refer to your notes if you need to, like it's not a problem during the interview. But also, in the beginning of your interview, look at how much reading you have to come. So my pre-reading was 7.5 pages long. Knowing how much you have to read helps you pace yourself, which is really important. So you kind of know what you're going to skim over and what you're going to prioritize. So grading. My interview, I thought, was a train wreck. It was not, thankfully. So my first half of the interview, I got described as outstanding, a little bit of a flex. But essentially, I really did well on the pre-reading section. And that is the section that gets most people. One thing I'll say, when it comes to the section where you're talking about statutes or you get a hypothetical, that's going to be the section where you're going to have the back and forth, and it will feel like, your interview is interrogating you, or it almost feels like they're attacking you. They aren't, they're testing your knowledge. So don't sit there and, fumble and feel intimidated by them, because that's not what they're trying to do, even though it feels like it, because it's a very nervous situation to be in. Try to be responsive. So if they're guiding you in a direction, respond to that. Think, what are they trying to tell me? What points are they highlighting? So if you haven't considered, for example, a certain exception to a statute, so a statute might say that the physical aspect only applies if you do something rather than say something, right? Then if they're guiding you in that direction, try to respond to that. Be conscious of the fact that they're saying that, because if you just stay staunch on your view, it's not going to look like you're very teachable. At the end of the day, your interview is a learning experience as much as it is interviewing you. So think about what you're trying to get out of it as much as, trying to showcase yourself. Because if you approach it as though you're learning, it's going to reflect a supervision and it's going to be more impressive. So, top tips from Downing lawyers, because we all had very different experiences. I'm a lawyer, so I have to cite my sources, so you'll see everyone's names on there. But get your teachers to quiz you, think out loud, GPT voice feature, etc., etc. These are things that have been mentioned already. One thing I'd say, so Joe, he mentions record yourself talking. That is a very cringe thing to do. People don't like it. And it's daunting, but it is so incredibly helpful, because we tend to be very self-critical. So if anyone's going to criticize you, well, it's going to be yourself. And also speaking to family, or even just a teacher, whoever it is that who you're not terrified of, because don't go to a teacher you're scared of. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But do it in front of a familiar face, because it kind of subdues all the nervousness you're experiencing, and then you can perform better. And then it's just basically when you get to the interview, it doesn't seem so foreign. I've also mentioned a couple of my tips. So speak to someone who's not familiar with law. If you're talking about a judgment of a case and you go onto the Supreme Court website, is what I would say, read a case summary and then try to deliver it back to someone, because someone who has no idea about law, if they can understand what you've just said to them, why this case was important, who was involved, then clearly your explanations are coherent, which is one of the 3 C's that Clem mentioned. Very important in law. Your articulation, being concise and being coherent is like the most important thing. I mentioned before about being a bit formulaic, so breaking things down. It is almost like in primary school, like a magic box exercise where you've got something that's blank in the middle and you need to kind of get to the end result and you're thinking about what's missing. That is a lot of what it's like. Just break it down like that. Think of, what have I got? What haven't I got? And just trial and error, really, because that's what it is in the interview. You're not going to get everything right. And then also just a general thing, not even law specific, avoid filler words. We all do them. I've probably done them several times throughout this, but try to be conscious of it. And then also tell them what you're doing. So everyone says think out loud, but also you can't just go straight from thinking to speaking. So if you need a second to think, tell them, can I have a second to think? Don't just pause and go silent, because they have no idea what's going on. Your interviewers aren't mind readers, so communicate with them. And then finally, best of luck. Like, you've all got this. I'm sure it will go amazing. I want to highlight one piece of advice on that slide. So this is from my good friend Rafe, and he says, good luck, and remember, you aren't supposed to get it all right. And if there's one thing that I can drive home for anyone doing the Oxbridge interview, regardless of your subject, is that you aren't supposed to get it all right. Remember, Oxbridge is looking for teachable students, not perfect ones. So yeah.
Bravo. Yay. I loved it all. I loved it all. I'm very proud of all of you. I'm amazed by it. This is just beautiful stuff. I love what you said about try to get something out of it. I was speaking earlier with Daniel, and it's like, think about it. It costs £25 to do a UCAS, and this is a free moment in time where you're sitting in a room discussing something hopefully you love with really cool, very clever people. And if you think about it going into it being like, what can I get out of this? How can I improve my worldview? How can I improve my criticality? Like, then it's more of a transaction rather than you being put on a kind of hot seat. And then I thought the pre-reading idea, Elishba, is a really good one, not just about the pre-reading itself, but actually just looking at how much you've got to go to try and pace yourself. I'll talk about pre-reading at the end, because we've got the lovely Hamid to kind of finish us off with engineering. But pre-reading does vary hugely. Engineers will not get a pre-reading, but as you can see, Elishba had hers 30 minutes before. Hannah had hers, was it 3 days before, or was it Daniel? You had yours for 3 days before. It's all so different, but the amount of time you have will also dictate how much they're expecting you to extrapolate, how much they're expecting you to kind of garner from that information. If you have 30 minutes, it will be a brief overview, and they'll want that kind of macro superstructure kind of, okay, whereas if you have 3 days, they'll be expecting really kind of detailed, nuanced thought and thinking. But anyway, we'll talk more about that after, but thank you so much. And now, last but certainly not least, we have the phenomenal third year, the most experienced of the group, engineer Hamid from Christchurch, Oxford. Hamid, do you want me to be
Yes, please. Yeah, please do click on it. I was going to say, though, are we super pressed for time? Because
not really.
I was going to add a little section, so I'll share my screen. Probably, I think it's like the slide after this or next slide. I was just going to do a bit of graph sketching, because I've seen a lot of questions in the chat about graph sketching, and graph sketching is like a very, I don't want to call it easy, but honestly, it's a very simple skill once you really just learn it and get used to it. So I was just going to do a bit of a live demo, because I think that'll be really nice for everyone to kind of benefit, even if they're not doing engineering, because I can see it has a lot of overlap.
Totally. The floor is yours, mate.
Yeah. So I'm Hamid. I'm an engineer. So as you can imagine, this section probably won't be as interesting as the other ones, but hopefully it will be equally as informative. I'm the co-founder of Accelerate. So that's a tutoring company that I run with my friends. We have a lot of free resources, so definitely check that out. I attended a public non-selective sixth form in the northeast of England. So, I mean, like Daniel's been saying in the comments, you can go to Oxford or Cambridge from anywhere. And there you can see my A-levels, my GCSEs, and some sections what I specialize in. So yeah, on to the next slide. We're just going to start off with basically just explaining what engineering interviews are like. So engineering interviews, and this applies to like physics or maths as well, by the way, and a lot of econ from what it seems like. But to be honest, I've never really heard anything about econ. It's a technical interview. So they're interested in going through questions with you. They're going to be asking you problem solving questions, engineering interview sort of questions, and it's going to be very hands-on technical. You're going to be doing working out. You're going to be doing calculations. I mean, not major calculations. You're probably going to be working with variables, but basically you're going to be using your brain a lot, and it's going to be, you know, a bit similar to the admissions test in terms of the sort of questions they're asking you. Probably going to be a bit more long answer, but yeah, it's just going to be very technical basically. Typically you do get 1 or 2 short questions at the start on your personal statement, but these are very, I'll say they're quite unimportant. I don't want to say they're completely unimportant, but they're almost completely unimportant. Like I can actually recall in my interview, my tutor literally, like, I could see he had my personal statement printed out in front of him, and he literally just looked it down at it. He was like, "Oh, I see you talk about," and he like quickly read off one of the words on my personal statement, and he's like, "Yeah, talk about that a bit." And I talked about it for 2 minutes, well, and he didn't seem to pay any attention, and then we just moved on to the interview. So your personal statement really doesn't really matter for an engineering interview. But yeah, that's basically what the interview is going to be like. And then moving on. Clem, do you mind clicking the slide? Okay, thank you. So moving on, we're going to get onto some key skills slash interview technique stuff for engineering. So the first thing is drawing a diagram, and I can't stress this enough. If you do engineering or physics, this is an extremely essential skill. You know, all throughout this webinar, people have talked about, you know, displaying your thoughts, you know, explaining your thoughts. Unfortunately, in engineering, since we're working with, you know, technical questions, a lot of the times you can't really explain in words what you're thinking. That's why a diagram is extremely important. It lets you visualize your own thoughts, and it gives the tutors an opportunity to almost see through your eyes for a second, right? And let them see your understanding. And it also makes it very easy for like tutors to like prompt you, correct you. Like if they see you draw something wrong on your diagram, the tutor instantly knows that basically you misunderstood something. And it just makes it very easy for you to basically be corrected by the tutors and for them to guide you. And it's just a very essential skill. So wherever it's possible, draw a diagram. Like if you get given a chunk of words that this is a question, immediately draw a diagram. If you move on to the question and you have to work on a different part of the system or whatever it is, draw another diagram. Just keep drawing diagrams. Like honestly, I can't stress it. Like just draw whatever you can, and that will probably help you out. So yeah, here are some examples of when to draw a diagram. Like I said, when you're initially presented with the question. Also, if you're going to attempt some like force calculations or something of that nature, you know, you want to balance forces or whatever it is, just draw like a very simple free body diagram just to show which forces are acting on the object. And like I said, oftentimes this can actually help you. You might miss a force, but because you drew the diagram, you'll realize that, for example, you just missed gravity. You know, maybe you're nervous, you just forgot to include gravity in the calculation. When you draw your diagram, it's going to make it very obvious to you that you've forgotten that, and you can mark it on quickly. So it helps you as much as it helps the tutors as well. So it's just a very essential skill. Moving on to the next essential skill. This has been repeated a lot throughout this webinar, and I'm going to repeat it again, which is thinking aloud, right? This is essential for an interview. The tutor can't read your mind. They're not going to be able to follow you unless you explain what you're thinking. So this is just something you have to get used to. To get used to thinking aloud, I would say, I mean, for engineering and physics, right, you're always doing problem solving questions, right? So from now on, whenever you're doing a problem solving question, obviously granted when you're not in a lesson or you're not in an exam, think aloud whenever you're doing the question. Like even if you're at home by yourself doing your maths homework, doing some exam questions, just force yourself to think aloud, right? And develop that as a habit. And it will be extremely useful for your interview, and it will become second nature. You won't even have to think about your interview. You won't even have to think about thinking aloud in your interview. You'll just do it automatically. Obviously, you don't really want to do that in your real A-level exams, but they're quite far away, so you won't have to worry about that. On to the next key skill / technique, and this is graph sketching. So I'm going to do a bit of a... Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm going to do a bit of a demo for graph sketching now in a second, but just to explain, it's just another key skill for engineers. It's very likely you're going to have to draw some sort of graph in your engineering interview. Depending on the questions you get, it might be a very complex graph. I remember I got a very complex graph. It might be something more simple. I mean, like I said, I've heard a lot of economists in here saying that they're probably going to have to draw graphs as well. Physics, you might have to draw graphs. This is just a very essential skill that you really want to master before your interview. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly, and you should be able to see my Miro board. Let me see. Right. Clem, just yell at me if you can't see the Miro board. But I think
that's it.
right, you guys should be able to see. Okay, great. So when it comes to graph sketching, there's multiple ways to do graph sketching, and I've heard a lot of people mention differentiation, but because most of the graphs they're going to ask you about, or like almost all of them, are going to be made up of functions you've already seen in A level, it's actually very easy to graph sketch without doing any differentiation for most of your interviews. I can't speak on all of them, like maths and everything, but for engineering, typically you won't actually have to differentiate, and if you do, it'll probably be quite obvious. So here's an example, right? So we get a function that's a composite function. We just say f of x is equal to x of sine x, right? And basically, you almost want to think like an engineer, right? So you're an engineer and you have this function. So simple questions you probably want to ask as an engineer is, firstly, what's going to happen when x is really small, right? This could be an input in your system, whatever it is. You're interested in when x is really small, what is my function, right? And that's pretty obvious for you to tell. You can see that this is just going to go to 0, right? Because you have x multiplied by sine x, sine of 0 is 0, I think. It's been a while since I did some maths. And obviously you have 0 times 0, right? So it's just going to go to 0. Next, obviously, you look as maybe, imagine this is time instead of x, right? You have f of t. What happens over time in my system as time gets very large, right? So let's say as x now tends to infinity, what will happen to the system? And we can see that the system is very likely going to blow up, right? Because x is going to be extremely large. So regardless of what sine x is, this function is also going to be extremely large. And unless sine x is 0, obviously, we want to take that into account. But I'll sort of discuss that later. So what we're going to say is x gets really large, our function is also going to get really large, right? So these are two observations we've been able to make just from looking at our function. We haven't really done any calculations. Next, we can look at the fact we have a sine graph, a sine function, and it's composite, and we can draw out some of the properties, right? So everyone knows this from A level, at least I hope you do. And let me move up a bit. So we know sine is periodic, right? So we know that this function is going to oscillate. And if you haven't heard of the term oscillating, it just means it's going to, I don't know I forgot the word they use is in A level, but it's going to be periodic, basically. It's going to be a periodic function. It's going to bounce between some values, okay? And we also know that it's going to be an odd function. Now, this is very useful because that means we only have to draw one half of the graph, right? And this is usually something you want to pick up on if it's going to be an even function or an odd function, because it basically cuts your work in half and you only have to focus on one half of the graph you're going to draw, right? And lastly, because it's sine, we know basically sine is going to oscillate between some values. So we know, for example, when x is equal to pi over 2, sine, or rather f of x, you can say, well, we know sine at pi over 2 is going to be equal to 1, right? And then we can look at when x is equal to pi, and we know sine is going to go back down to 0, right? So we can basically just plug in some of the values, and obviously, as a mathematician, you can just put plus n pi, and it's just going to keep repeating itself as this is a periodic function. I think I didn't show that part, but yeah, I just put it down there. Now we basically have enough to actually sketch our function just using these values that we know, right? So I'm just going to put this on here. I'm going to focus on drawing just the, oh, that's a terrible line, I apologize. I'm going to focus on just drawing the right-hand side of the graph, as like I said, we know this is an odd function, right? This composite function is going to be odd. So because of that, we don't need to worry about drawing the left-hand side. We can just say it's going to be flipped or like opposite of the right-hand side, right? So if I want to sketch this, when x is equal to 0, everything is 0, great. When x is really large, I know my function is going to be somewhere up here. It's going to go really large as well, great. And then I just know some key values as well, right? So I can just start to put them in. So I know it's going to go like this, and it's going to go down there, and then it's going to go down there, whatever happens, right? And obviously, we know x is going to get increasingly larger as well. Well, this function by itself, right, is going to get increasingly larger. So we can just put that on as well. So that's just going to go up like that. And then that sort of gives us an idea, right? Because we know now, as this gets larger on the bottom as well, this is sort of going to dip down when it's equal to 1. Right? Because when sine is equal to 1, it's just going to be equal to x, as that's our function up here. And we've basically drawn it, right? And we didn't need to do any differentiation. It's quite a complex function. It was quite simple. as you can probably tell as well, once you get more experience, you can kind of just draw composite functions by looking at them. So like, for example, if I didn't want to do any calculations in the first place, I could have just drawn this line because I know that f is equal to x, or you can say another function g is equal to x. And then I could have also just drew on sine as well, right? So I could have just, where's my pen gone? I could have just drawn on a sine as well. And then I could just tell, okay, when sine is equal to 1, that value is going to be moved up here, and it's going to meet x, and it's going to do the same thing up here, right? And then just looking at that, I could just sketch on that. I hope that makes graph sketching a bit more clear, but basically just by looking at the extreme behavior and then the really small behavior, and then basically the behaviors that you know from the function, is it periodic, is it odd, you should be able to almost draw anything they'll give you very simply without doing any differentiation or like massive calculations. But yeah, anyway, I'll get back to my presentation. I'll just stop sharing.
And Hamid, the Miro, it will be used. Kids don't need to like download it before. It's a free website, right? That's really easy to use.
Yeah. It's a free website, totally free. I put it in the pre-reading for engineering, so you can just try it out. But anyone can use it. They use it for my Oxford interview. I don't know if other colleges always use Miro or they use something else, but it's pretty common in like the engineering space. So
yeah, I think it is
pretty good app to have. Yeah, anyway, so that's graph sketching.
I just also say that Hannah and Danielle and Alicia, if they need to leave at 9:30, please do. But if you do need to leave, guys, just kind of, I don't know, maybe summarize any of the questions you've seen coming through that really apply to your field. That would be amazing. But don't feel like you need to stay because obviously it's getting late. But Hamid, back over to you.
Right, sorry, I think mine is dragging on a bit, so I'll try to go a bit faster. But yeah, but last thing on graph sketching, just practice drawing different functions. Think about any composite function you can make using A-level stuff. So like throw in exponentials, throw in logarithms, throw in sines, causes, cos squared, whatever it is, and you'll become very quickly you'll become very comfortable with it, and you'll almost become an expert. So just practice using good technique. Finally, the key skill / interview technique for engineering is going to be your maths / physics skills and content. Right. So for your interview, your content that you're expected to know is going to be the same as your admissions test. So I would just use your admissions test spec as like your interview spec. It's going to be the same thing. And just make sure you're familiar with all the concepts on there. You're very comfortable with them, like you were for your admissions test. Also, make sure you are still doing a lot of problem solving practice because, like I said, it is a technical interview. So the best case scenario for you in your interview as an engineer is just that you can answer everything correctly and the tutor doesn't need to prompt you at all. That's very unlikely to happen, that you won't need any prompts at all, because obviously the tutors will set the questions at a level that the average candidate will probably need some prompts, right? But like I said, keep practicing your maths, keep practicing your maths and physics content, and it will do you wonders for your interview. You want to be as good at maths and physics as you can be on your interview day. Finally, I've got some resources on that are very useful for engineering. So firstly, I've got iwanttostudy.engineering.org. These have interview questions on them. They're very useful specifically for university admissions. One thing I would note though is that they usually offer hints on the question. And when you're doing these questions, if you can't do it initially, use the hint, because that's almost going to emulate what an interview is going to be like, because you have that hint almost like from your tutor or your interviewer giving it when you're in the interview. Whereas this website almost like lets you click on the hint yourself. But do use that hint and don't just like try to do the question. If you can't do the question, give up. Because like I said, in your interview, you're very likely gonna, at some point hit a roadblock and you're gonna have to take the hint from the admissions tutor and you're gonna have to bounce off that to continue. Next, there's also some old long style questions from the PAT. These are very, very, very useful and very like interview-like. If you go to the old PAT papers at the back, they usually have like ridiculously long answer questions, but they break them down into like multiple sections, and that emulates an interview very closely. Like in an engineering interview, it's quite unlikely that they will just like dump a massive question on your head that's going to take half an hour. They'll probably start off with the question and keep building and building and building and building, and then you have like a really long sort of question. Also physics Olympiad questions. I personally haven't used them, but look, anything problem solving is really going to help you for engineering, for physics, for maths. So any questions you can get your hand on that are going to be difficult around admissions level or a bit harder are going to help you. Next, also, there's some official mock interviews on YouTube. I know Christchurch has some. I don't know if you guys have heard of Oxcentric, but he did one, but it's not on his channel, but his is very good. So try find that on YouTube if you can. I can probably find the link. And I think there's a couple more like official ones, but they might be for like, not for engineering, they might be for physics. But like I said, engineering, physics, especially at Oxford, I know it's similar at Cambridge, but you guys have like some triple science thing going on. I don't know how that works, but at least for Oxford, engineering and physics are like very, very similar. So use any of those mock interviews you can find on YouTube. Finally is my top tip, which is to stay calm and fall back on your maths and physics principles and your laws whenever you get stuck. It's going to be a hard interview. You're probably going to get stuck at some point. I mean, I got stuck a lot during my interview. Like I thought I did horribly, but the key thing is to keep falling back on your maths and physics principles, you know, from A levels and from GCSEs, because look, they're not going to give you a question which you can't solve with the content, you know. So not to say if you can't solve the question, you know, your disappointment or whatever. It's just the fact that you have the information to solve the question. Like you have that, that's a fact. So if you can't solve the question, just take a step back and think about which principles you think apply to the question. Even if you have no idea how to solve the question, take a step back. Okay, is this a centripetal motion question? Okay, what are the laws of centripetal motion? Okay, is this question concerning force? What forces are at play here? Is this a question to do with energy? What stuff can be going on with energy here? And this is why diagrams are very useful as well, because they're a way of presenting all the information you know in front of you. And usually that can sort of help you get that intuitive step to see what you're doing. But like I said, even if you don't get the intuitive step, fall back on your maths and physics principles and the tutors will help you, they will hint you, and you'll be able to keep going with the question. Yeah, that's it.
Legend. I am trying to click and stuff. Thank you, Hamid. That was wicked. What a I've never seen graph drawing and I didn't really understand it, but it in a way, I actually think STEM students are advantaged because you can do that. And in a way, one of the first questions, which I think is a really phenomenal question, was from Iz. I don't know if Iz is still here, but it was like, any tips for structuring your thinking? And in a way, yeah, diagrams does that. And I would say for anybody who isn't using Miro or kind of graph drawing, think about the picturing your plan, thinking about writing out the question, and thinking about kind of, I don't know, I like brainstorming, thinking just really visualizing the different stems of your brainstorm and then kind of working your way through, even like often like using your hand and being like, okay, so that question, there's like this and this I need to sort through, go through, and then come back to the question and keep coming back to the question. But I think, yeah, I think that was phenomenal, Hamid. And you didn't run over at all. We all ran over, so you got the rough end. But that was really wicked. Thank you. And I've also, by the way, told loads of people since about really good way of preparing for engineering or applied science is using the PAT, using the MAT, and using those longer questions, and they really work because they're very academic, but they just require that like slightly more extended thinking. So it was really clever. Well done. So it's now nearly 9:30. I've got a couple of questions that have kind of kept coming up. That's a QR code, by the way, if you want to book any of the group interviews that are being run, just to let you know. So we've got one space on English, one on law, one on history, 2 on econ, 3 on biochem, and 3 on engineering. And it's totally fine. Like, we get it. Like you might still be waiting. That's why we've kind of scheduled them for when we have. But yeah. So I've got a few questions now. Alicia, and Hannah, do you want to just let me know if you are still able to be here? Otherwise, I won't kind of draw on you. But the first, okay, cool, Hannah, thank you. And obviously, no worries. And actually, can we just say, you know what, before we do Q&A, can we just say a massive thank you to Danielle, to Hannah, to Alicia, to Hamid for giving up their time to be here and give such a clear and precise kind of slide deck, because it was effing amazing. I learned loads. I'm just going to mute. Okay. Thanks, guys. That's wicked. The love is felt. So thank you. Okay. So the first question I just want to go back to is this question. about any tips for structuring your thinking. It says, I tend to have an idea, but then start to almost idea split as I start to talk. And I find this a lot, and it's really common. I think the key thing, and I'd actually love your feedback in the chat, Hannah and Elizabeth and Hamid, indeed, about how you would go about structuring your thinking. But I would say you kind of need to identify why you're splurging like that. Is it anxiety? Is it excitement? Is it unclear? Is it like performance related splurging, like trying to like impress with just loads of things? Because I think once you know why, then you can kind of target it. But as I say before, I think it's really, really clear, really, really important to repeat the question, visualize the different parts of that question, and somehow kind of keep yourself to those different spines of your brainstorm, and using your hand, if that's useful, to kind of go through. Keep going back to the question, define the question, and then I think pause before you end, and check that you've answered that question. Because the reality is, when you're in this situation, it's all verbal discussion, you're not going to be able to immediately have the answer. The whole point of dialogic learning is that through discussion, you come to a further clearer point. So allow yourself to have that splurge, allow it to be a bit messy, but then take a step back, review the question, review what you've just said, and then refine your closing argument. I literally interviewed a student today, and she literally did what Iz was talking about. Lots of lots of splurges, quite good stuff, but it never really was like kind of coherent. It never kind of came together. And she literally just finished mid-sentence, and you could tell that it was like, okay, that's too much, done. Try not to get overwhelmed, but try and take a step back and think, okay, so how can I put that all together? How can I piece that puzzle together? So that's what I would say. So Hannah has got, in science, they'll often structure the question for you. They'll rarely ask a completely open-ended question. Mostly start with a simple question, build it. Yeah. Sorry, I won't read it out because it's there for Elishba and Hamid, the response, which I think is really cool. Great. Great, I'm glad. Okay, another question is, how much do they factor the interview into the process? Really great question. So Oxford and Cambridge, remember that 20 hours of kind of 20 hours of people time for each application. That's not just all on your interview, is it? That's your personal statement. That's your teacher reference. That is your Cambridge SAQ, if you have one. That is your written work. That is your admission assessment. And that is your interview. Now, I would say when you get to the interview room, I would say 85% is now down to that interview. But up until the interview, it's that conglomeration of factors. And I think, remember, when we're getting to it, the difference between Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, St Andrews and Durham, which are all top 5 universities, give or take, whatever your opinions, is the dialogic learning. And if you are someone who is just the best brain ever, but absolutely hates to be discussing, hates to be kind of sharing ideas verbally, just wants to sit in a dark room and get on with their thing, you are not going to thrive in this environment, and you will not get, and you will not be invited to this kind of way of learning. So I think ultimately, when you get into the interview room, the interview is absolutely fundamentally the kind of biggest thing now going for you. But up until that point, it's a multiplicity of factors. That's what I would say about that. Another question about when to ask for feedback. So just to be really, really clear, you don't ask for feedback during the interview, but after, when you get your offer, or when unfortunately you do not get your offer, don't think about it like a rejection. You just didn't get an offer, because then it somehow depersonalizes it, I think. You ask for feedback then. So January, basically. The feedback, if you didn't get a place, will be quite general. It won't be, oh, they failed to answer this in this way, or they said this weird thing. It's never very specific. And then talking about this freedom of information, I might get Danielle to kind of do a TikTok on it. Basically, you can do a freedom of information request on any institution that holds any information on you, and they will have to share everything, all the notes and everything that they've written on you. And if you are in your first round of application, and maybe you might reapply, it will be fundamentally important for you to have all that information. But essentially, you get feedback in January, not before. Oh yeah, this was a great question, and actually, Hamid, Alicia, and Hannah, I'd love to know your thoughts on this as well. This was from an HSPS student. However, it refers to everything. If they ask you what you think about a concept or a theory that you've never heard of, will you lose kudos? So if they ask you about something that you've never heard of, will you lose marks, basically? And essentially, I will say this very clearly, no. It's a bit like supercurricular. They are not judging you on what you know or what you've done. They're not judging you as to whether you scaled Himalayas or you read a book. They're not judging you on the content or the breadth of your knowledge. What they are interested in is how you apply what you do know to what you don't. And I think it's really important when you don't know something to own it immediately and be like, hang on, oh God, I don't think I've ever heard of that. Or can you explain that to me? I've never heard of that before. You might, I think as Hannah kind of mentioned, you might actually have something trigger and be like, oh yeah, I do actually know more than I thought I did. Or you might not, and you need to ask them to guide you. But they're not going to care that you don't know. What they are going to care about is if you aren't able to have a go, if you aren't able to apply. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to ask, what was the date of, I don't know, something obscure and require you to know it. This is not a GCSE or A-level knowledge game. And I think kind of Hamid might have touched on it. None of these questions are going to have either a yes, no answer or a right or wrong answer. I think Alicia also touched on this as well. All of these questions are going to have a multiplicity of answers, lots of different combinations, lots of different ideas. So it's not about getting it right. It's about exploring the options. Basically, that was a very long-winded way of saying it. I don't know if that helps. Yeah, and as Alicia has said, yeah, get explanation. Don't be afraid to ask for clarity. Don't stumble in the darkness pretending you know, because they'll know. Something last two questions that I want to go through. Number one, pre-reading, because I think there's lots in the chat about when do you get it, how long is it, what type is it. Every course and every college will have different pre-readings and different timescales, and it will change year on year. But you've now had a sample of what is kind of being presented. I wouldn't worry too much. Oh, in fact, I wouldn't worry at all, because essentially it's going to be something that is written in English. Even those applying for MML or modern languages, it will be written in English and it will be related to a subject that you're interested in. Your job is to breathe, stay calm, and to try, and I think the main thing is to try and chart the argument of what the text is about. Sorry, number one is to try and chart what the text is about, and number two is to try and chart the argument, and then number three is to have opinions on it. What you like, what you didn't like, what you found interesting, what questions you have, what issues, what links. And if you are going to get a pre-reading, more often than not, you will probably also be doing a kind of essay-based A-level subject. Just use now for the next couple of weeks, every day, try and find a different type of pre-reading, or like Alicia's example of finding those statutes, and just practice giving yourself a period of time, no more than 30 minutes, because that's the minimum, and no more than a week, because that's the maximum. Other than history, I've heard is 2 weeks. And just practice like how to read it, maybe even create a little graph for yourself of like a little key, like maybe a question mark means question, maybe an exclamation mark means stuff you're excited about. Maybe you could do like an arrow to be linked to something, but just practice kind of you looking at stuff you've never seen before. But really don't panic about the pre-reading. Thomas, I would use Danielle's kind of econ stuff. I would say that's the closest thing that for PPE. You might have a philosophy kind of extract. You might have some graphs. You might have some kind of maths graphs. But I think generally, yeah, econ. Let's see people with initials T1 in school, both applying for law. That's hilarious. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah, final question that I just want to share is, essentially, all of you want to know what types of questions were asked last year for this college, for this course. And I think the major mental block around interviews is that, unlike mark schemes, unlike exams, there are not past admission questions publicly available. There's only word of mouth. There's only personal anecdotes, like we've just gone through. All I would say is year on year, those questions change. But the things we know, and the other thing I'd say is, even we in this room, as knowledgeable as we are, and I've been doing this for 20 years, I had my multiple interviews years ago, and I've been interviewing kids ever since. We don't know what you're going to be asked, genuinely. The tutors right now will probably be deciding together. They'll be collating their experience. They'll be deciding what they want. But ultimately, there's no one that's going to be able to help you really extrapolate what is actually going to be asked. All we can do is advise you. But hopefully you can get from this webinar, these are the styles of questions that are going to be asked. And fundamentally, and this is the same for if you're doing your A-level revision or if you're doing your IB revision, as long as you understand why they are asking these questions, that is the route to then being able to kind of not necessarily predict what's going to come up, but understand what types of questions are coming up. They are not going to burn your tie. They are not going to throw a balloon in your face. They are not going to eat a banana and smile at you and want to see how you react. That's all rubbish. They are going to give you an array of questions that stretches you academically, that helps you apply what you know to what you don't know, and will involve a degree of debate and discussion and exploration. Other than that, there is no point really, I would say, trying to identify the question. But have confidence when you're using AI, when you're using ChatGPT to generate questions. And a really clever thing that I would do, get a transcript of a kind of an official YouTube interview from Oxford or Cambridge, download the transcript, put that transcript into AI and be like, use this as a model, now create 5 further questions for X interview. That is probably the most assurance you can get that your questions will be kind of vaguely similar. But like I was saying earlier about, that mountain and doing the half marathon, until you do it, you don't really understand what it is, and it feels really full of fear. But the reality is, as soon as you've done it, come and contact us after and be like, oh yeah, I don't know what I was worrying about. It's going to be hard, but it's not the questions that are going to be hard. It's the level of detail it will require, that kind of thing. Anyway, that's a lot of me chatting. How do you know when you said enough or when you said a certain point? I think you've got to come back to the question, and you've got to come back to your plan and what that question involves. And if you've gone to the nth of your knowledge and your kind of your argument, then you said enough. They might also stop you. I really enjoy stopping students when I've had enough and move on. So they might, yeah, exactly, Ahmed. But they also might kind of just wait to see how long you can drown yourself out. But I think you just need to read the room on that one. But it's a good question. Right, it's now 9:45. I think we should close it. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Like, well done for being here. You have done half of the journey. You're keen. You're keen to work. You want to know more, and it's amazing. Hamid, Hannah, Alicia, and Danielle, you are absolutely phenomenal. I hope you found this helpful. I should have put my Trustpilot review. If you wanted to give a quick free review, that would be amazing payment for it. But I really wish you well. I really wish you well. Try not to think that this is something you need to crack. Try not to think that these are questions you need to try and identify and copy and mimic, because they're not. Just ready yourself where you can, review the knowledge that you've got, and practice sharing ideas, practice using past questions that you've garnered from the World Wide Web, and try as best you can to enjoy it. I know that sounds mad, doesn't it? But will you come back? Elizabeth, that is the quote of the century. In fact, I'm going to screenshot that. Thanks, mate. I'll send it to my mates. that's a screenshot of that. Anyway, yeah, but do let us know how you get on, and if you want the group interviews, do sign up, because these guys, they know what they're doing. Yeah, you will absolutely smash it. Enjoy, and let us know how you get on, and have a safe and productive evening. And actually, one final thing, Daniel kind of prompted it as well. I know there's a lot going on for you right now. There's mocks, there's this, there's that. I would say for these 3 weeks, for the first and only time in your life, I would potentially prioritize your mock in your interview over your mocks. Don't tell your teachers, and I wouldn't be saying that at school, but do you know what I mean? I think this is key. All right. Loads of love, everyone. Thank you, guys. Undergrads, you're legends. I'll be in touch tomorrow. But over and out. Thank you. Yeah, you can access the slides. I'll add them to the Kajabi session, and the recording should be automatically on there for you. It'll probably take a bit.